What's going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today we're gonna be looking at the Xero Shoes 360. So 4 things that I like about this model is number one, Xero reworked the upper on the shoe. So with the Prio and with the HFS, they can be a little bit more prone to tearing up when there's excessive friction on the upper portion of the shoe. But with this shoe, we have a thicker material throughout. We have some rubber traction actually up here in the toe box and throughout the forefoot. And we have a revamped toe box up here, which feels pretty dang durable compared to prior models. The second pro about the shoe is that similar to all the other models, it does have the removable insole, so you can take out the insole and it still has that finished bottom down here. So if you're like myself and you love to wear your barefoot shoes for things like deadlifts or any other lower body movement where you really want to feel the ground, it's fantastic to take that insole out and get even closer to the ground with this shoe. The third thing that I like is that they reworked the sole. So compared to the other models, this sole actually wraps up a little bit more on the lateral and medial side, which is fantastic for multi-directional movement. Plus, with the reworked traction down here, the shoe grips a lot of different surfaces, and whether you're moving forwards, backwards, or laterally, I don't think you're gonna have many issues with traction in this shoe. The fourth pro with this model is that, as with all Xero shoes, this has a zero drop. So if you love having a zero drop in your cross-training shoes, this is a phenomenal model for tackling that. Plus, with the overall sole and removable insole, you can get really flat to the ground and really have that pretty much more natural slash minimalist barefoot feel when you are training. Overall, I have really enjoyed the shoe, and dare I say, they may be replacing my Prios as kind of my go-to. I still love my Prios, obviously, but in a cross-training setting, these have been proving to be really great, and the overall rework construction, especially from a durability standpoint, has been pretty phenomenal across the board. But now, let's talk about a couple of cons that I have noticed. All right, so now 2 potential cons I could see folks having with the Xero Shoes 360 include number one, be very careful when you're outside training on concrete to not drag the toe in this model. So it looks like we have a mesh up here on the toe box, and as you can see, like I drugged my toe the other day when I was playing pickleball to save a couple shots, so like more of like a lunge shot where I was dragging that toe. We have a little bit of scuffing already on this mesh, and note that I only drugged the toe a couple of times, and now that's pretty standard with this type of material, especially when you expose it to something like a friction from like a concrete surface. So not saying that the durability with the shoe is bad at all, because truthfully, until I played pickleball in this model, it was really hard to find the actual big con with the overall construction. Just to be careful when training on concrete, and if you're doing like any form of concrete sprint work, I would say avoid anything where you're going from like a prone position to popping up where you might be dragging that toe, or doing things like burpees, etc., which are not really that comfortable in concrete in the first place. The second potential con I could see folks having with this model is that if you're newer to barefoot shoes and you love cross-training shoes, acclimate to the shoe slowly. I have seen some folks on other barefoot shoe reviews say like, oh, this model is very uncomfortable. Well, it's usually because we jump right into wearing this type of footwear after wearing something with a thick midsole and outsole for quite some time. So not really a con, just a consideration that if you are into cross-training shoes and you want to try barefoot shoes, acclimate to the shoe and get used to wearing it, because it is going to offer slightly less support than what you're used to. However, that will help build up some of the foot musculature that you probably haven't been using for a longer period of time, but we'll save that for a different video. But now let's talk about the best part about this video, which is the performance of the Xero Shoes 360. All right, so when chatting performance of the Xero Shoes 360, we're gonna break this section into 3 different parts. We're gonna talk about lifting, agility and plyometrics and hit, and then shorter runs and daily wear. Now, in a lifting setting, this shoe has been phenomenal. It feels just like all the other Xero shoes that I rock, so the Prio and the HFS, and I love the overall toe box width to really grip the floor. And for my case, where I take out the insole when I'm deadlifting and doing lower body movements, this shoe has been phenomenal too. The traction on the bottom is phenomenal for both machine work and free weight work, and I've deadlifted well over 500 in this shoe and have had no issues with stability, obviously, because it is a barefoot shoe, so there's really not much material separating you from the ground. So in a cross-training setting when it comes to lifting, because I've talked on now free weight and more like bodybuilding slash powerlifting style of training, I actually think this model has a slight edge when it comes to being, dare I say, slightly more responsive. And I think if you leave the insole in, especially if you're somebody who's acclimating to barefoot shoes and you love cross training, so you're doing things like thrusters, cleans, anything that you're gonna have a little bit more of like a sharper ground impact on the foot in your workout, this model actually feels pretty dang good. And maybe it's just a placebo because it's designed for cross training, and maybe I think it's a bit more responsive compared to like the Prio and HFS. But overall, I think this model excels in both a cross training setting and a more static strength work setting. So if you're a power lifter, if you're a functional fitness athlete, I think this model does a pretty good job at tackling pretty much all of the asks you might have in the gym. Now, when it comes to agility, plyo, and hit, what I will say with Barefoot shoes, once again, if you're not used to training in them, then you may want to ease into that style of training with this model. But compared to the other Xero Shoes models, especially for the more training focused shoes, I do think this shoe has a slight edge in that category. Why? Well, once again, circling back to the sole of the shoe, I think it does actually provide a little bit more grip. Plus, with that reworked sole that wraps up on the medial and lateral side, we do get a little bit more out of the shoe, especially when it comes to lateral movements. So if you're doing a lot of skater strides, if you're doing a lot of plyos, I think this model does a really good job at accommodating those tasks. And overall, if you are trying to get into Barefoot shoes, once again, acclimate to this slowly, but I do think you're gonna really like this because with that wider toe box, you're gonna really be able to grip the floor. And once you adjust to this style of footwear and that style of training, I think you're really going to enjoy them because they are also very lightweight. So when it comes to shorter runs, this model is pretty standard. If you're running like, let's say 800 meters or 400 meters in your functional fitness workout, I think this model will excel for you. Plus, if you leave that insole in, you'll have a little bit more of a responsiveness to this model. But what I will say is in Barefoot shoes, you obviously do not want to be heel striking. So you will have to adapt a forefoot/midfoot strike, and that's gonna feel way more comfortable for you in the long run. Now, on a day-to-day basis, I actually really enjoy this shoe too. Why? Because I think the aesthetics of this model actually look pretty dang good. It still has that Hirashi-inspired design, so you have these straps throughout, but it's covered by the upper mesh, and it just gives it like a much more like low-key look, which I actually like. Like, I don't like shoes that are super like overly like, hey, here's all this design feature and color. I like my shoes a little bit more neutral. So from an aesthetics point of view, I actually really like this model for a day-to-day wear basis. So across the board, I think whether you're a recreational lifter or a cross-training focused athlete, this model does a really good job at tackling pretty much all the tasks that you can throw at them in a single workout. All right, so now let's answer the question, are the Xero Shoes 360 worth it? I think if you are somebody who wants to get into barefoot style shoes and you love to cross-train, this is a phenomenal model for tackling your training. Now, also the Prio will work for my more recreational lifting folks, and it has a slightly better price point. But with the reworked upper of the shoe, if you plan to do rope climbs or anything else where you're gonna have a little bit of friction on the upper in your training, 360 is gonna be the best call. Plus, they have a price point of $109.99 USD at their normal price, but on sale around like $87.99. And so for that price, I think this model is a really good deal, especially if you can get them for less than 90 because they are so versatile. And with the reworked upper construction, I think they will last you a while, especially if you're very conscious of how you're using them and you're not dragging the toe on the concrete like myself. All right, so when talking heel to toe drop and weight in this model has a 0mm heel to toe drop. And for the weight of this shoe, and this is a size 10, we're looking at 10.2 ounces. All right, so now when talking sizing and fit in this model, most folks should be safe going true to size. So I got my normal size in this shoe, and with the wider toe box, even if you have a wider or flatter foot, you shouldn't feel cramped in this model, and the length fits true, so there's never really any heel slip despite it having a slightly lower boot. So overall, you should be safe going true to size in the Xero Shoes 360. All right, so when talking price for this shoe, we've mentioned already that it's $109.99 USD at its normal price point. However, with seasonal sales and other sales that Xero Shoes runs, you can find them for $87.99 USD or anywhere around like $90. So definitely check that out and look at different colorways to see if there are any sales or if you can save a little bit of money. But for $109.99 USD, I think this price point is pretty dang good, especially for my cross-training folks, because most popular cross-training shoes cost between $130 to $150 USD. So these are a little bit less. And honestly, if you are into barefoot shoes and that style of training, I think the price point is pretty justified. All right, so I have had a couple of asks comparing the 360 to the Prio. Now, I will say I plan to put together a big full breakdown of the HFS, Prio, and 360 and compare them all in a bigger video, so stay tuned for that. But three differences about these shoes right off the bat is number one, the reworked upper once again. So the 360 has this rubber tread up here. It has a breathable mesh throughout the midfoot, and that extends to the heel. And then we have that like more synthetic layer that covers the toe and the heel. In the Prio, it's a slightly thicker material throughout, not nearly as breathable, and we don't have that rubber tread. So if you are doing things like rope climbs in this model, it can be a bit more prone to like fraying and tearing up at a slightly faster rate compared to this model. Now, another difference is that this model has that reworked sole, so we have that extended layer here on the medial and lateral side, and we have a reworked traction. On the Prio, we have a full rubber sole as well. Overall, they both provide adequate traction, but I do think the 360 does have a slight edge when it comes to multi-directional activity, especially laterally. The third difference about this shoe is that as a whole, I think the 360 actually fits a bit more athletic in nature. Like, it still has that same wider toe box and it still feels like a true barefoot shoe. However, there's slightly less material back here in the boot. The Prio is a little bit more clunky, dare I say. Like, it still feels fine on the foot and it's comfortable, but it does have a slightly thicker material back here on the heel. So that is something to think about with these two models. This model has a reworked upper for durability, but it still breathes fairly well, which is something I think the Prio actually kind of falls short with. All right, so when chatting on the construction of the Xero Shoes 360, making our way up here at the toe, we have that extended sole that wraps over the toe box here. Then we have like this mesh / suede material here. What I will say is, once again, be careful of it fraying if you're dragging on the concrete. Just don't do that and you'll have this shoe last longer. Then we have this rubber material throughout the forefoot for extra durability, but also giving you a little bit more grip too in things like rope climbs. We have the sole that wraps up on the medial and lateral side here. So boom, boom. And then we have a more breathable mesh throughout. So we have this layer here, you can pretty much see right through it. And we still have that Hirashi inspired design that's in a lot of the Xero shoes, especially the training shoe models. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eyelets that run up, 6 eyelets back there for lace lock, slightly thicker tongue. I haven't had any issues with the tongue sliding, which has been phenomenal. We also have a loop here on the tongue to prevent that. And as a whole, the tongue has been really great and the midfoot has been awesome for locking that foot down. Making our way to the boot back here, we have a lower profile design. We have slightly less material than the Prio, as already mentioned, and we have an external loop back here to help pull that shoe on. And then making our way to the sole, we have a reworked sole for multi-directional activity. So as you can see, we have arrows here, we have a hot spot here for the ball of the big toe to give you a little bit of extra traction and stability. Then we have that suede material back here throughout the heel to provide a little bit of extra boot support. And then once again, the insole is removable in this model, so boom. And once you take that out, the inside of the shoe is finished, so you're not gonna be walking on that awkward texture that when you take the insole out of most cross-training shoes you're left with. So overall, I think that's the gist of this shoe. If you have any questions on this model, hit me in the comments below and I will answer whatever you have. All right guys, that wraps up my review of the Xero Shoes 360. Overall, I have been thoroughly impressed with this model thus far. I have really enjoyed training in them. And if you have any questions on this model, hit me in the comments below or reach out to me personally, whichever you feel most comfortable with. And as always, guys, drop a like on the video, drop subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.